Good morning, viewer. Welcome to our Fosak TV. Here is the breaking news. Yes. On the eve of the 2020 World Cup in Qatar, FIFA President Gianni Infantino launched a tirade against Western critics of the controversial tournament in an explosive hour-long monologue. Infantino, the boss of World Soccer's governing body, looked on gloomy as he addressed hundreds of journalists in Doha, Qatar Saturday. We are taught many lessons from Europeans from the Western world, he said, referring to criticism of Qatar's human rights record. What we Europeans have been doing for the last 3,000 years, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lesson. Despite the opening match kicking off on November 20, Infantino barely spoke about soccer and focused his attention on what he called the hypocrisy of Western criticism. In a remarkable press conference, Infantino seemed exhausted. He has spent a lot of time defending FIFA's decision in 2010 to award the World Cup to Qatar, a controversial decision made when he was not the governing body's president. This tournament will be a historic event, the first World Cup to be held in the Middle East, but is also mired in controversy, with much of the build-up focusing on human rights, from the death of migrant workers and the condition may have endured in Qatar to LGBTQ and women's rights. Infantino, despite admitting things were not perfect and said some criticism was profoundly unjust and accused the West of double standards. The Italian opened the news conference by speaking for an hour, telling journalists that he knew what it felt like to be discriminated against, saying he was bullied as a child for having red hair and freckles. Today I feel Qatari, today I feel Arab, today I feel African, today I feel gay, today I feel disabled, today I feel a migrant worker, he said in a front of stunned audience. I feel this, all this, because what I have been seeing and what I have been told, since I don't read, otherwise I would be depressed, I think. What I have seen brings me back to my personal story. I am a son of migrant workers. My parents were working very, very hard in difficult situations. Infantino said progress had been made in Qatar on a range of issues, but insisted real change took time, adding that FIFA would not leave the country after the tournament finished. He suggested that he thought some Western journalists would forget about the issue. We need to invest in education to give them a better future, to give them hope. We should all educate ourselves, he said. Reform and change takes time. It took hundreds of years in our countries in Europe. It takes time everywhere. The only way to get results is by engaging, by serving. Infantino also addressed questions around the last many decisions to ban alcohol from being sold at the 8 stadiums which will host the tournament's 64 matches. In a FIFA statement issued on Friday, the governing body said alcohol would be sold at fan zones and licensed venues. The Muslim country is considered to be very conservative and tightly regulates alcohol sales and uses. In September, Qatar had said it would permit ticketed fans to buy alcoholic beer at World Cup stadiums 3 hours before kickoff and for 1 hour after the final whistle, but not during the match. Let me first assure you that every decision that is taken in this World Cup is a joint decision between Qatar and FIFA, he said. Every decision is discussed, debated and taken jointly. There will be over 200 places where you can buy alcohol in Qatar and over 10 fan zones where over 1 lakh people can simultaneously drink alcohol. I think personally, if for 3 hours a day you cannot drink a beer, you will survive, especially because actually the same rules apply in France or in Spain or in Portugal or in Scotland, where no beer is allowed in stadium. Now, he added, it seems to become a big thing because it is Muslim country, or I don't know why. Infantino finished the press conference by insisting that everyone would be safe in Qatar amid concern from the LGBTQ community. Homosexuality in Qatar is illegal and punishable by up to 3 years in prison, but the FIFA president promised that this was a tournament for everyone. Let me mention as well as the LGBT situation. I have been speaking about this topic with the highest leadership of the country several times, or not just once. They have confirmed, and I can confirm that everyone is welcome, Infantino said. This is a clear FIFA requirement. Everyone has to be welcomed. Everyone that comes to Qatar to welcome to whatever religion, race, sexual orientation, belief he was, everyone is welcome. This was for our requirement, and the Qatari state sticks to the requirement. Infant to say, behind the effort for Saktibi.